Next up, we are going to hear from StoneEagle, and what we're going to talk about is the complete picture F&I performance review for 2025. So you're not going to get a piece of the picture. You're going to get the complete picture. So please do me a favor and help me in welcoming up Cindy Allen, who is the CEO of StoneEagle F&I. Cindy, you ready?
Ready.
You're ready? Stage is yours. Enjoy.
In a great restaurant, nothing is an accident. Every detail is there on purpose. And the same idea applies in top-performing dealerships. Every detail on purpose. Like you said, I'm Cindy Allen. I started out answering the phone, but today I have the privilege of serving as the CEO at StoneEagle. Tell you a little bit about StoneEagle. For almost 40 years, we've had the privilege of sort of working in the background, behind the scenes, tracking F&I performance and measuring what really matters. So we get full deal detail for automotive transactions, supporting more than half the industry. And so bringing all that detail in, what we have the opportunity to track is things like products per deal and PVR. And we have the opportunity to really dig in and see how individuals are performing, how lenders are performing and supporting the dealer, how various F&I products are driving profitability. In short, we have the opportunity to really see all the critical elements that drive profitability for the dealership overall. And with that, we get to see where real opportunity lies. Okay. Many of you are going to have great dinners while you're here in Vegas. It's actually one of my favorite things, all the phenomenal restaurants here. And you know, one of my favorite things about walking into a great restaurant is the fact that everything kind of feels effortless. The menu is simple, the room is calm, you know, the service is really smooth. But what you don't see is what's happening behind the scenes. You don't see all the planning, the prep, the chopping, the mixing, the fact that you have to get up and get started at 4 a.m. in order to be able to be ready for the lunch and dinner service. You don't see all that. And in top-performing dealerships, customers can have the exact same experience. They don't need to see all the crazy gyrations that your teams go through to help them find the right vehicle for them and their affordability envelope. They don't see all the gyrations that your team goes through to find the right financing and the right structure for that. But what we found in looking at and talking to dealers about how their results come to be, what we know is that customers who come in to an experience where the information is clear, where the conversation is transparent, where the presentation is purposeful and specifically for them, we know that they're confident, they feel more at ease, and they have a better buying process. Many of us walked into 2025 worried. You know, there were tariff talks, there were inventory swings, there were EV questions all over the place. And, you know, there were rate concerns. But what we found with our dealers is that they actually remained calm. They looked at their numbers and they pulled the right levers in order to really push their dealership forward and maintain profitability. So today we're going to take time to look at the complete picture. It's a report that we publish through webinars on a quarterly basis, and today we'll look backwards at 2025. And what it'll show us is that dealers turned a noisy year into steady, consistent results. Actually, they ran their dealerships, most of them, like a Michelin star restaurant, with consistent, precise preparation and planning in the background, yielding a simple and comfortable, confident experience at the table, or in our case, the desk, right? So, you know, in 2025, we could have had a little bit of a train wreck because it could have been a lot of chaos, but it wasn't. It was actually a great experience. So jumping in here, I want to tell you about this. So this is our year-over-year snapshot from the complete picture. And so we're looking at the data of 2025 as an average compared to 2024 as an average. And so our dealerships span the entire country. So I mentioned we have the privilege of supporting more than half the market. So every region is represented in this data. Also, every tier of vehicle, every OEM brand, etc. So you're looking at quite a thorough picture of what happened in 2025. One of the things that I love when we look at this is we're seeing that F&I remain strong. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute because we hit all-time records. You know, that's not luck. That's dealers doing something right. We like to say that they're running it like a Michelin star restaurant. But we've had the privilege of watching this type of activity for decades now. Dealers who understand their technology and trust their data are in turn able to analyze that and then make decisions to really understand what the customer wants and make changes that drive results. So in 2025, you have product revenue remaining strong, you have PPD growing. And what we have found from talking to our dealers is that PPD is growing because of the way that they are simplifying their process and their presentation to their customers. So they're knowing what works and they're implementing their conversations with the client accordingly. One other thing I want to point out about 2025 is that F&I was the foundation of profitability in dealerships. We'll dive into that a little bit more, but just on the surface, as we think about what has happened in the compression of front-end margins, F&I became the foundation that kept the house standing, if you will. And so, one of the things that we also saw in this was the dealers who were winning, the dealers who really were getting ahead in this were the ones who weren't necessarily trying a lot of new stuff. They were the ones who were really understanding what they did had these kind of results. So they were really analyzing their data to figure out what was pushing them forward. So consider with me for a minute a Michelin star menu. It's simple, it's short, it's intentional. Every item on that menu is thoroughly tested and then refined. Thoroughly tested and refined. Do I have any other fans of like Knives Edge or one of the other amazing cookie shows? Did anybody watch The Bear? Yeah, amazing. The dedication that goes into that is pretty phenomenal. But what we've also seen, like those Michelin star restaurants, is that top performing dealers in 2025 really understood what moves for the customer in what sequence in order for them to be able to understand and then close. And so one of the major components of that is that dealers who did simplify actually saw higher attachment rates. Their PPD grew, and so their results were pretty significant. Now, one of the things we also saw in that is the dynamic of the composition of products that they were selling start to shift and grow in new ways as well. What we know is that when they have the right data sitting at the table, they're able to make those decisions, and they're doing it without having to second guess what they're doing because they are leaning into data, and so they're able to lean into what works. So same thing happens across the board. So I want to now shift into another component of our complete picture. Before we were looking at 2024 compared to 2025. These numbers are Q3 compared to Q4 in 2025. And so again, you see PPD held steady. Dealers were looking at their benchmarks. They were knowing what it took to be successful. And over here in PVR, we see this 1995 average for Q4, up obviously from Q3. But in November of 2025, we saw the highest PVR we have seen in record of 2025. Phenomenal results. And so I think what is important with this that I want to point out is that you see these bottom two numbers. It's totally a seasonal reality for us in our Q4 compared to Q3. We have a little bit of slowdown in the number of units, which obviously impacts our ability to drive that top line revenue. But seasonally, pretty normal and at the same time, massive record-hitting quarter when it came to top line. These various components are what dealers are looking at in order to really have that knowledge to dial in. And I think one of the things as we talk to dealers who are driving that are in that top percentile is that they don't have the habit of looking at things on a monthly or quarterly basis. They're actually looking at this data on a weekly or daily basis. I love NADA. It's like a big family reunion, right? And so over the past few days, we've had the opportunity to sit with some of our StoneEagle family and our clients. And one of the repeated things that people will tell us is that I wake up and have my coffee with StoneEagle numbers every single day. And so there's this consistency with top performers, and you know, anyone who's in this business knows that what you measure, you can expect results on. And that idea of looking at information every single day was something that was very, very consistent among the dealers who are in that top percentile. So one of the things we like to say, sticking with our little Michelin star example here, is that dealers who read their numbers, like a Michelin star chef reads their sauces, are the ones that were staying ahead. So digging in a little bit more, I want to have you reflect with me on our average deals per dealer. So what you're looking at, the orange line represents 2025. All the other lines are previous years. And what you see here is unremarkable. We're kind of middle of the pack. We did have that bump at the beginning of the year. You all probably recall that tariff talks drove a little bit of fear and drove a little bit of pull forward, potentially for consumers who might have been planning later to buy, but they bought a little earlier. And then you see a tiny bit of a bump there in August, September, where it was a little bit more of the EV credits going away that drove a little bit more of a bump there. So this is what it looks like. So I generally kind of consider this, other than that spike of pull forward at the end of Q1, a kind of a normal year. That is in pretty significant contrast to the numbers when you look at them from a total F&I income per dealer per month. This orange line is head and shoulders above years prior. And so what I think is amazing is when we consider, you know, I mentioned that foundation of F&I actually being profitability, stability for dealers, this is what it was driving. So in a year where we had that front-end margin pressure, we had phenomenal performance in the F&I office driving great things. So when I think about what drives F&I, I start to think about, you know, the other side of the equation as well, and what is, you know, the reality from this year on front gross was pretty significant. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner here, you're seeing a little bit of a long term. You see that little mountain in the middle represents what happened kind of post-COVID, that giant mountain that we had. So on the far left, you have 2019 numbers compared to today on the far right, which is our 2025 numbers. And we have, if you compare those two, where we are today in front gross is 31% lower than the norms in 2019. So I think that's significant. And if we just kind of work our way backwards, the big chart in the middle informs us that over the past 12 months, front gross dipped by 59%. In the past 24 months, it was a 71% decrease. And if we look since that mountaintop back in 2022, it's a 90% decrease in front gross. So when you think about what dealers are challenged with and having to make up the difference, it's significant. Now, back in 2019, one of the major drivers for front gross being as low as it was and being in that 400 range was actually negative numbers on new vehicles. So we don't see that dynamic today. We see that our average front gross on new vehicles is actually staying on the positive side. And so that's a new, different dynamic, but despite that, we have that lower front gross. So when we're thinking about what drives the other side of the equation, the F&I product revenue, the first thing most of us think about is that VSC. It's our top product when it comes to ability to drive income, and so it's usually the first thing top of mind. So what you see in the bottom right-hand corner here again is the penetration. So penetrations drive so much for us, right? And you see kind of a flat number here. It's 2.2%, softened a little bit if you're looking from the beginning of that line to the end. Lots of nice little peaks and valleys, but pretty stable. At the top, though, it's not. It's actually growing. So we're seeing a 10% increase in income over that same period of time. And if we just look at the past 24 months, that's that big chart in the middle, you're seeing an 8.2% increase in the average revenue driven by vehicle service contract products. Great, great performance. Now, Gap, slightly different story. A little bit more of the curves here from the ups and downs that you see in penetration. Again, that's the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Unlike what you see in the top right-hand corner. So over that same time frame, you're seeing a 16% increase in Gap revenue that's being driven by, income that's being driven by Gap products. The smaller window and the larger chart here is showing us a smaller window of time. That's that 24-month period of time, and you see an increase of 5.6%. So that's vehicle service contracts and Gap. That's typically the first couple of products that we think of when we're thinking about driving income in the F&I office. However, what I like to think of as the rising star are ancillary products. There's tremendous strength in this segment, and I want to talk you through what you're looking at here. On the right-hand side, you're seeing a pie chart that represents the share of F&I revenue or F&I product revenue across the three, I'll call them categories of product. The big 54% is VSC profit, so 54% of the income is being driven by VSC sales. The orange section, 12% is being driven by Gap sales, but that 34% that you're looking at there is actually the ancillary product sales, their share. And the 22% above that is telling us that that segment has grown by 22% since 2019. I think that's significant growth. And what is also interesting, on those previous two charts, what we didn't see is an erosion in VSC or Gap revenue. So you have all of your products having steady growth. In ancillary, what our product providers have done is bring to the surface lots of opportunities for us to not only sell individually, but sell as bundles. And so I'll talk you through that. What you see at the very top is paint and fabric protection. So that's coming in at almost 20% penetration now. And stacked underneath that, you see prepaid maintenance, security products, tire and wheel, and the next one are those packages. Those bundles, as we've talked to dealers about how they're leveraging that as a tool in their simplified conversation with a customer, is that they start with a bundle in many cases. If the customer just can't swing that, they're backing it down to whatever product is the most important for them. And so they're using this type of tool provided by their product providers in order to really drive that increased penetration. Phenomenal job. So the result? PVR, significant increase. So over this 24-month period of time, our PVR has increased by 14%. If we compared that back to the 2019 days, our PVR is sitting at 58% more than it was in the pretty, kind of flat days leading up to the end of 2019. So great, great progress there. When I say F&I is the foundation of profitability for the dealership, this is what that looks like. You can have extreme volatility in that front gross picture, but dealers are able to lean into the stability, and in this case, as we just saw, the growth over long period of time here has been pretty consistent. So that's what we are saying when we're talking about the foundation of profitability in the dealership. So I am a giant data nerd, and I could sit here and go through and drag you through hundreds of pie charts and bar charts and line graphs because that's just the way I am, but I'm not going to pull you through that. We actually decided for this conversation with you today that we wanted to prioritize something different. In a market where you have the cost of the vehicle, negative equity, driving the average amount financed up by 14%, yet dealers are able to dial in a recipe, so to say, to drive front-end profits as significantly as they are right now. We decided to prioritize really leaning into what the secret sauce of those results are. And so I want to end with this before we move on. Whether a restaurant is a pub like Fox and Hand in the UK, or if a restaurant is a palace like Desi in Madrid, they have the opportunity to earn a Michelin star. The same thing applies here in our industry. No matter what OEM brand you represent, no matter what region of the country that you reside in and sell from, you have the opportunity to create a Michelin star experience for your customers. And what we see in a Michelin star restaurant is as soon as they get their Michelin star, they have a 10x increase in income and visitors into their stores. So creating that comfort and that simplified, trusting conversation with customers, we are seeing literally in the data is driving higher attachment rates, higher PPD, and higher results than some of the other methodologies that we've taken in the past. And so one of the things that is important about that Michelin star kind of concept is your customers are never going to see the churn of activity that you're going through. They're never going to see all the effort, that happens when you're trying to find the right loan for a customer. But they will absolutely taste it when they sit at your table or your desk. And once they taste that kind of experience, they will crave it. And that's driving loyalty in so many ways. And so, I want to just point out to you, there's a handful of folks sitting around here, but when you sit down at dinner tonight, keep in mind there's a buzz of things happening in the background. And speaking of Michelin experiences, we are actually holding a reception in our booth, 2109. We'd love for you to stop by. I did mention I was a data nerd. I would love to answer questions that you might have about what we're seeing in the data in the industry. We also, there's a little flyer they're going to pass around for you. Bring this with you and you'll have the opportunity to spin to win. We actually are giving away one every day, a VIP Formula One experience here later this year, so please come by and see us. Really appreciate it, and I would just say please walk away with the idea that that Michelin experience can drive 10x returns for your organization. Thank you so much.